Yeah, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you making the time. We love the support that you all provide the industry in general. 2025, interesting year. Teddy's going to provide the benchmark overview stats there, roll the statistics that we generally provide. Also, in the next week or so, we'll be releasing our formal benchmark report, which provides even more detailed and deeper insights on the industry. So excited to share that with you all here the next week. But again, thanks for everything you do. I got two kids in childcare, and without you, we'd be struggling deeply. My wife and I both work full time, so thank you so much for all that you do for the industry, for the families and the communities that you serve. It's you're vital to this country, so thank you for everything you do. I'll turn it over to Teddy now, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, great to have everybody here today. Teddy Hook, head of product at LineLeader. Many of you, I think, have shown up to a few of these quarterly series now, and it's great to have you back. If you haven't, thanks for joining us. I think anybody that's here today is showing that they're interested in data, they're interested in benchmarks, they're interested in targets, and that means you're in a great place. That means you care about your business, you care about achieving and overachieving, and excited to share with you a little bit about what we have here and the update going forward. So always one of my favorite parts of the quarter is pulling together this data with our team and getting a chance to share it with our incredible industry and provide some value there. So I think most of you all know who LineLeader is. If you don't, and you kind of just popped in because somebody threw the link your way, we are, of course, a software platform in the early education space across end-to-end family journeys with three core products we serve. And we do really try to track families from pre-enrollment all the way through withdrawal at your center. And that is relevant because a lot of the data we are talking about and referencing today does actually come from our Enroll platform. So that's why we kind of just like to surface this up front. A lot of our users are banging down the door asking us to get corresponding benchmarked data on retention, and we are working on it. I know I'll get ahead of somebody asking the question, so we're working on that too. But today, a ton of the data we're benchmarking, and we've actually benchmarked for years, is coming out of our Enroll platform. And that gives us a really good insight on kind of what's happening on demand, on the demand side, a little bit on the supply side as well. So about the data, right? All of the data we're showing today is from our US customer base. We have an incredible opportunity to serve early childhood education across the globe, but we are focusing just on the US today. The data is often segmented into three groups. We do that because it allows us to pull out trends, right? Sometimes you'll see us just reference it as our smaller to medium-sized businesses, our mid-market operators, and our enterprise kind of really large operators. There are distinctions between those in the early education space and how they operate. So it helps us to split up the data from an analytical point of view. We look at statuses in our CRM system. A lot of our customers like to customize those, but we have a really nice kind of algorithmic way to align those statuses to generate the data. And we do like to look at registered a lot in our data set. And sometimes folks say, hey, well, why do you choose registered and not enrolled or started? And what's the difference? There's a lot of reasons for that. We think it's the most accurate way for us to deliver a true accurate benchmark, and just keeping in mind registered for us in our system and how our customers use it and how we stack that status. Registered means, they have an expected start date. They maybe didn't start just yet. Okay. So before we dive in, we started doing this last quarter. We talk about this a ton on our side. You all talk about this a ton in conversations that you're part of. I think it helps to look a little bit at the macro. We're not going to spend a ton of time looking at the macro because this is a little bit subjective, right? We don't have hard data on this. The hard data we're going to get to here in a second. But what is kind of the sentiment like? And you can please drop commentary in the chat. I know our team will be reading it if you agree with this or disagree with it, of course. But if we kind of take the macro look at sentiment in our industry right now, enrollment is okay. It's okay. I wouldn't say it's great, right? And we'll look at the data, but one of the interesting things we're hearing is like mature sites that have been well established continue to do well. New sites are tough. I think it's a really, really tough environment for folks opening up new centers, right? We're not sure if that location has proven, the demographics have proven, list building's harder, competition is very hard. We're going to talk about a lot about competition today and going forward. We know there's a couple of key age groups that remain really, really tricky to grow right now, especially that kind of toddler range. We do see employer sponsored programs for those of you that take part of them. Those are really good sources of leads and demand generation that I think has been healthy. So it's a little bit up and down, right? There's some things to be positive about, some things to be a little concerned about. Workforce, I do think is actually one thing that we think is kind of improving, and y'all can very much keep us honest on this. Teacher retention was a huge challenge the last few years. That has gotten a lot better this year. Always trade-offs in early education, which is why what you guys do is incredible, right? There's never a time when everything is going perfectly. We think teacher retention across the macro environment is better. That makes it, directors are still a position that are heavily, heavily leaned on. There's so much they're doing. I think the conversation about how we focus, simplify, give more tooling to directors, huge thing we discuss at LineLeader, and I know you all do as well because that continues to be a bit of a tough position. And policy is all over the place, right? I don't think there's been, this is a very chaotic time for policy. Policy is a huge piece of what drives many of our customers, many people within the ECE industry. And I just think confidence in general, do we know for certainty, with certainty, what we are getting from a funding side, what parents are getting from a funding side? The confidence is dropping a little bit. So there are some things I think we feel good about macro wise. Other things we're a little cautious about, right? We're a little cautious about. And we kind of compare these to a couple of years back to 2023 by design, because on the macro, it takes a little bit of time for us to really pull these themes out. So comment if you think you agree with some of these or if you disagree as well. And then how can we, start to break up really the last 6 years now into eras? Little T Swift shout out here, our eras tour. It does seem pretty defined, right? It seems pretty defined. Some different themes that we are going through as an industry, right? I actually joined in 2020. Many of you on the call have been a part of this industry much longer than that, and I'm sure you could take this thematic exercise back much further. But 2020 was, of course, shock, right? Oh my God, are we going to make it? And we did. We did incredibly well. I actually think I came out of that period incredibly confident in the early education industry and what we do, and we will survive, right? That was incredible to come over that period of concern. 2022 is fascinating, right? There was incredible policy that drove financial incentives for families and for operators. And it was kind of this artificial stability, right? It was like, wow, things are actually pretty good. Like we're strong. We are seeing huge demand. Staffing was the piece that was incredibly challenging back in that 2022, 2023, even 2024 period, but demand was very high. What we're seeing now over the last 24 months is what we're kind of calling post-relief reality, right? We're probably now settling into this environment where we know mixed use delivery is here. We're going to continue to push for it. Competition is going to be high. Demand is stabilizing a little bit. We don't necessarily see an environment where there's going to be a huge surge in demand for care. So we're hitting kind of ceilings on tuition. A lot of folks are still saying they're even going to push that ceiling up a little bit in 2026, but it's like how much higher can we continue to go here? So we're kind of, I think, as an industry settling in a little bit and saying, okay, this is where we are, right? This is what we should kind of expect. We know there's a lot of competing priorities out in the space. Um, how do we move forward? How do we push forward? So it'll be interesting to see what plays out in 2026. I think there's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot we need to watch for. So, all right, enough of me telling you about the macro view, kind of from a thematic standpoint. Let's look at the data, which we
Hey
love to.
Teddy, real quick before we move on, we did have some questions in the chat that were relevant. When we were speaking about enrollment being challenging for newer childcare centers, why do you think that is? That's a question from Margaret, and Stephanie had weighed in, sharing that childcare is a word of mouth business, and that takes time. Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I mean, I think there have always been challenges opening a new center, right? Like you do have to kind of establish your brand within that community very quickly and try to build up your presence. So I think there's always challenges. I think particularly what we're seeing is there's just not as much demand in the industry as there used to be, right? So if you're going to open up a new center, I think on paper that area might look good. Hey, we think there are a lot of families here. We think there's a lot of opportunity. There's maybe not a ton of centers. But what happens when you go and open the door, it's like, hey, actually, maybe there's not as much demand here as we thought there was. So there's always been challenges to opening a new center in terms of how you're going to establish your credibility and your brand and your presence in that space. I think what's changed is we're not quite so sure there's extra demand in a lot of these areas that kind of our traditional data is telling us there should be. And that's what makes it harder. There's just fewer people there. That's what we're hearing out there. And y'all are the ones opening the centers and actually even know it a little bit better than we do. But it's a great question. It's not to say we should be fearful of growth. We are seeing growth everywhere. We're seeing operators open new centers all over the place. So it doesn't mean to be fearful of it. It just means, we have to think carefully about where the demand is and where our opportunities are and how we make realistic estimations on our growth targets, especially early on. Um, so this is kind of the major data point we track, the major data point we track. And, again, if you're kind of reading the header on the slide and you're a little bit new here, I always kind of joke, Teddy, why are you making this so complicated? What is a median average lead per register? It's a mouthful, right? It's a mouthful. But we're very simply looking at the largest operators that we work with across the United States. If you're in the middle of the road, over each quarter, how many leads are you seeing register? Are you seeing raise their hand, potentially pay for a spot and say, I am going to start on this date? I'm going to start on this date, right? And this is telling us about how many kids are you kind of getting to sign up, you know, throughout any given quarter, trended over time. Always see a big dip in Q4. Not surprising. That's the lowest part of our industry. But I think the macro, again, takeaway is 2022 was quite good, right? That's kind of our artificial demand. We are struggling to get back up to that. We're kind of in this new normal. 2023, 2024, 2025, you're seeing a lot of overlap, right? A lot of overlap, a lot of kind of consistency and merging to where it's like, yeah, this is kind of just where we are now. So if we dig in, and again, if you are new here, I know if you're returning, you're used to our crazy tables. If you're new here, I will walk you through this because there's a lot of great data. We love poring over the data, so we throw a lot at you. Don't worry about looking at knowing where to look. I am going to point out where you should look throughout the next few slides. But I will just start to explain a little bit what this data means, especially for some folks that might be a little new here. So we are looking at what we'll call cohort data. And that's super important to talk about because cohort means we're isolating to only data that was captured in that quarter. Gives us a lot of options to just specifically target that group of leads. We'll look at non-cohort data in a few slides, and I'll kind of explain the differences. You're going to hear a lot from LineLeader in our benchmark report that's coming out and today, and whenever I talk with our customers, right? Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Just traditional ways you should be kind of looking at your pipeline and how we interact with various segments of the pipeline. New lead to tour, this is our top of funnel. This is our top of funnel. Tour scheduled to tour completed, that's our mid funnel. This is this fascinating, unique part to early childhood education, right? There aren't many other businesses and industries where you require a tour to win business, right? Ours typically does. Tour completed to registered is bottom of funnel, and then this new lead to registered is kind of your end-to-end funnel view. So we'll look at this every single quarter. We will specifically in this table look at the enterprise operators, so 26 and above. You might be saying, hey, I'm a single center. This doesn't relate to me. That's okay. We have data coming up on the next slide that actually is going to target your peer group. We do like to try to isolate it down though, because the more we can get like customers and like industries together, the more we can rely on the accuracy of the benchmark and the trend. So fascinating data here. Ultimately, we're looking at Q4, right? The very right side of the chart. This is what we've just published. I'm going to focus on median today because if I talk about too much, I'm just going to overwhelm everybody and we're going to get a little confused. But median for us, again, think of that middle of the road customer, middle of the road. So there are those that are definitely performing higher. There are those that are performing lower. But if you want to look at a benchmark, if you want to say, hey, how can I stack up against that kind of mid of the road performance from our largest operators in the United States in terms of how they're handling enrollment? Well, here you go, right? Here you go. This is kind of your data set. You're getting about 74 leads generated in Q4. That's slightly up from last year, right? Pretty far down still from 2022, 2023, right? So down from a few years ago, kind of flat to years past. We don't really want to look and measure Q4 versus Q3 because we know Q3 has September in it, right? That's a heavily driven month for lead volume. Q4 doesn't have that. It's always going to be down, but if we look at past periods, kind of flat. Then we'll kind of walk through each stage of the conversion funnel here. 61% new lead to tour, 74% tour completed, tour scheduled to tour completed. That's going to indicate families that are actually completing the tour from signing it up. 44% of the completed tours registering, and your kind of end-to-end funnel. 15% of all new leads registering, coming out to that number 12, which would say, hey, for every single location I have, I'm going to expect to get about 12 registrations over Q4, which again is always going to be lower. So we're going to dig into this in a lot more detail in a second. So just kind of hold that thought, but want to make sure I go over this and explain kind of what the numbers mean and how we stack rank them against prior periods. I pulled this slide way up in the deck. I think in previous quarters, I kind of pushed it to the bottom and I didn't want to do that this time because I think it is important to give everybody that view of, okay, well, what about me? What if I'm a 10 center operator? What if I'm a 5 center operator? What if I'm a 1 center operator? All of you are doing incredible work out in the space and you all face different challenges, right? You know, if you're 100 centers, you're going to have a very different model and very different resources than if you're 15. If you're 15, you're going to have a very different model and resources than if you're 2. But guess what? All of you are facing similar challenges. So we'll take each quarter, we will isolate it and look across these segments to try to tell us, okay, how are we seeing trends across the segments? Are they similar? I think in a lot of ways they are. In a lot of ways they are, right? We do know our largest customers tend to generate a lot more demand. And that is probably down to a couple factors. One, they're dedicating a lot more resources to it and probably dedicating more cost to it, right? Generating leads is expensive. They might have a little bit more capital to go and generate leads where maybe some of our smaller operators don't. And that's okay. And that's okay. I mean, I think you do want to be aware of that. There are other ways in the SMB and mid markets you can kind of position yourself to generate demand as well. But we do typically see the larger customers generating quite a bit more demand. When it comes to the funnel itself, there are areas some of the smaller operators do actually do a little bit better, right? And that's kind of in your mid funnel in terms of getting your completed tours to actually show up and complete that tour that they've booked, right? You see that drop off a little bit more in your upper market segment. Ultimately, when you get to bottom of funnel, you're seeing some similarities here and some differences. I think a lot stronger in the enterprise segment here in terms of do we actually kind of get to close that deal? It's quite a bit harder in the lower market segments, and then kind of your final number here of how many you're registering. Well, you're seeing quite a bit more, right? You're maybe getting a couple registrations a month in your lower market segments where you're getting quite a few more at the enterprise segment. So I would look at your peer group if you're going to take this from a benchmarking standpoint. I think that's where you have a really good opportunity to kind of like align your funnel. The most important thing you can do with any of this data, number one, make sure you have it for yourself. Like make sure you can go get your own version of this. Number two, measure against yourself from past periods, right? Number three is okay, now let me go start measuring myself against, the broader United States, the broader market I'm in. And maybe number four is okay, let me go measure myself against other peer groups. But number one, make sure, of course, you have this data for yourself and measure it against yourself. So we're going to jump back into kind of the big table here, which is a little bit isolated to our enterprise segment. But again, that's because we can see trends. These trends are common across all segments. What I did want to talk about too is down here at the bottom, you can see we've kind of started to add this, and that's that new lead to lost opportunity. All right, Teddy, like what does this mean? You are seeing at the end of the quarter, when we go and pull this data, right? About 56%, 59% median, 56% of leads are in a lost opportunity status, right? Are in a lost opportunity status. So I think we are trying to kind of continue this conversation that lost opportunity is okay. Like that's gonna happen. We know it's gonna happen. You're typically only getting 20% of your leads, 15, 20% of your leads through the end-to-end funnel. So you're gonna have a lot of lost opportunities. And that's okay, right? There's a huge focus you should have on tagging those and attributing those correctly so we can learn from them. But no matter what size operator you are, you're gonna see a large portion of your leads go to lost opportunity. So don't be discouraged by that. Don't be afraid to use that status appropriately. No, it is going to happen, but there are ways you can understand that data to really target where you're kind of spending your money. So I think that's important to note, right? We're not going to register everybody. We're not going to get everybody to a wait list. We are going to see more often than not leads go to a lost opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit later in the deck here about what we're seeing as some of those common themes. So kind of number one call out, right? Down here at the very bottom right, if we're looking at Q4, which is the data we're talking about today, we did see a slight increase in year-over-year leads registered. That's good. You're now kind of saying, hey, you actually showed us this in Q2, you showed us this in Q3, and you're now showing us this in Q4. So if you're just a visual person and the data is overwhelming you, you can kind of just look at the arrows to tell the story. There's so much red, and we're actually starting to see a little green. Now, this isn't jumping off the page. We're talking a 7% increase, a 13% increase, a 9% increase, really 1 to 2 leads. So that's where we go back and we say we're kind of stabilizing in what we might call the new norm, right? The new norm of what you can expect. We would love this to continue to be green. We hope it is. That means we're seeing more registrations. And hopefully that also isn't because you're seeing, more work, maybe struggling retention. We don't quite have that side of the story. That's another thing you definitely want to have as a business. Make sure you're kind of pairing this to your retention data. But we are seeing a slight uptick. That's good. We should feel good about that. but there's nothing crazy. We're not back at 2022 levels where we're seeing, 20 plus registrations a location, right? So good, but kind of flat-ish. Probably a decent trend we've now seen over the last 24 months where we can expect these numbers to settle in where they're at. All right, what about top of funnel? We talked about how many were registering. Where's the demand at? We touched on this a couple slides ago. Demand again, slightly up, but not by a lot, not by a lot, right? In Q4, I think it's a really good way for you to kind of measure and say, hey, are we getting 25, 30 leads a month at each location we have, right? That's where you're going to set yourself in kind of that middle benchmark from what some of the larger operators are doing. And again, of course, we're going to see this drop in Q4. You're always going to see the highest in Q3, pretty high in Q1 as well. And Q2 is not bad because, of course, our industry and seasonality and where some of the key months fall. So up is good. Of course, on average, you can see again, it's a little down, but kind of feels flat. Kind of feels flat. We're not seeing a surge in demand by any means, but we're not really dropping from past years. We're kind of flat. Where are we winning in the funnel? This is now the third quarter in a row. We are showing a really relevant increase in bottom of funnel conversion. That means when a family comes in and tours, the percentage of those families that you're getting to a wait list or you're getting to register at your center. This is where operators are making the difference right now. They're not generating more leads. They're not getting more leads to schedule tours. What they're doing is they're getting more of their tours to enroll. And this is where we are effectively seeing the kind of leading operators win today. How do you make sure the families that come into your building end up joining your community and your center for care? So I think that's a really big and important takeaway. I would want to be very sure I understand what this number is for my business and watch it closely, because this is ultimately where people are kind of winning and making a leading edge today. Top of funnel, the data is a little boring, quite frankly, but boring can tell us something too, right? Boring means there's there's a lot of consistency. We're not seeing a lot of variability, even as some other factors go up or down. You should expect to see about 6 out of 10 leads schedule a tour. Now we're seeing a huge push and a continued adoption of like self-scheduled touring methodology, letting families go book tours from the website. It's been increasing year over year for the last probably 5 or 6 years. That plays into this a little bit as well, right? Because now you're kind of eliminating the need to actually even book tours. A lot of families are just doing this on their own. So that definitely plays into, I think, some of the stabilization we see here. But again, it's an important number to know. You probably should be around 60%. What I'm going to do next here, of course, once I have this number, is I need to know which of my marketing channels are ultimately making up that 60%. Because if I'm spending a ton of money to go generate leads and they're not even booking tours, that's a very low quality lead. That's a very low quality channel. So, okay, we have the number, right? What do we do with next? I need to know the 40% that didn't book a tour. And I really need to make sure I'm not over investing in that channel, because those are low quality leads if they're not even going to schedule a tour, let alone show up for it. So that's the most important thing you can do once you get this number, is know the leads that make it up, so I can figure out if I'm spending my money in the right way.
Hey, Teddy, real quick, we have a similar question from Kelsey and Jenna. They're asking that, are you including waitlist conversions in the tour completed to registered conversion or just to registered?
It's a really, really good question. It's a really, really good question. This data set only looks at once they get to registered. So your number will be higher if you are including waitlists in it, right? If a waitlisted family goes to a registered status, absolutely they're included in the registered number, but we actually aren't including waitlists in it. So, earlier I'd showed a number where I was like, hey, you're seeing about 60% of leads go to lost opportunity, but that doesn't mean 40% of them are registering. You actually still have 20 or so percent of those leads sitting in your active pipeline. A lot of those might be on a wait list. You should absolutely feel very good about getting a lead to a wait list. I'll caution, very good. Maybe there's factors where you want to get them off the wait list if staffing's a challenge or whatnot. From a data perspective, you should feel great about kind of winning that lead, getting them through the funnel. But to be very clear about this, and that's a really, really good question, this bottom number to registered is not including wait lists. And you can choose to do that for your data as well. We want to kind of remove that variable. Good question. So I talked a lot about cohort data here, cohort data. And I've had so many of these conversations with our customers because there are two very distinct ways to look at leads and measure them going through your funnel. And this is not unique to early education. This is the same for any industry that has kind of pipeline and funnel management. Our cohort data, remember, is only looking at leads and families that entered your pipeline in that given period. We are very specifically looking at that group and tracking what they do. For Q4, that means if a family entered your system in September, but they registered in October, they are not in this data set, right? Because we're saying, give me the cohort of families that came into my system in this period. We love looking at cohorts because they are very easy to isolate and track. I always say if you are number one trying to look at things like your marketing spend and marketing effectiveness, you need to track cohorts because I need to know if I just spent $10,000 on Facebook. I don't care who came in from Facebook 6 months ago. I need to know who came in from Facebook since I deployed that $10,000 and how those leads converted, right? That is a critical way to view your data. You need to look at it cohort wise. Now, if I'm not just concerned about marketing spend, if I'm more concerned about just overall business performance, right? If I'm more on the operations side, I like looking at non-cohort. And stick with me here, right? Non-cohort is just what actually moved through the quarter, completely irrespective as when it was created. If a lead entered your system 6 years ago and registered in Q4, they are in this data for Q4. Now, that's probably pretty unrealistic, right? I doubt they would have entered 6 years ago. You probably would have moved them to lost opportunity, but I'm being a little dramatic to help to help kind of provide information about how we look at these data sets differently. So if you said, Teddy, what are people just seeing move through their system in a given quarter, completely irrespective of when that group of leads was created? Well, here's your data, right? Here's your data, kind of a nice little chart we've produced here on the right side. Again, you're going to see a big drop off in Q4. That's absolutely normal. But if you're saying, what's a good quarter look like to benchmark on? 62 tours, 44 of them completing, 19 registering, right? If I'm in Q1, if I'm in Q4, that's dropping way down. 39 tours, 29 completing a tour, 14 registering. Again, a great call being made. You might actually have some of those 29 that completed the tour going to a wait list that aren't showing up in that 14. That's a great, great comment that was made by some folks earlier. So, I mean, you need to kind of look at both of these numbers. I understand I could be like providing an overwhelming amount of information at this point. So if I am kind of making your head spin a little bit, just pick one. But if I'm doing a marketing-based analysis to know which of my channels are effective, I need to look at the cohorts because I need to know when they entered my system because that is the direct influence of where we're spending money and when we started spending money. If I'm a little bit less worried about that and I just need to know how many tours did we get last month? How many registrations? How many wait lists? How many withdrawals, right? I need to break the cohort apart and just say, just show me the data. So both of these are interesting. You're going to see a lot of alignment between them. They're not drastically different, but both are important numbers that I think are really good for you to have and for you to, number one, get your own version of this number. Then two, you can start benchmarking it against what we're seeing out in the space. Awesome. Well, where do we go from here? And I kind of list this slide out every quarter, and I just leave you with the notion of, go run this exercise on your own and look at some other areas where you might be able to dig into your business and your data and your statistics. Every year, we actually like to pull this together and give it back to you. It's a little bit lengthy for us to do on a quarterly basis, so we'll always provide the benchmark stats of conversion quarterly, but some others here, we do like to kind of stack yearly and give you some additional insight. So we have kind of a treat today to dig in a little bit deeper, right? What about inquiry types? Inquiry types for the LineLeader system, right, are going to track how is a lead entering? How is a lead entering? What is really interesting about this, if we look at 2024, measure against 2025, where is the difference? Those are kind of your pie charts on the left and the right here. Your first takeaway might be, okay, I'm seeing a 58% web lead drop to 51. How could web leads be going down? Well, okay, let's kind of understand the data here because they're probably not. But what is rising, right? Self-tour is going from 9 to 13. That's takeaway number one. We talked about this. That's across all of our mid-market to enterprise locations in our platform. SMBs are going to follow the same trend too. Everybody is driving more tours. You're probably seeing some customers get up into the 30% range here, 40% range here. It's a very popular method. The one the one kind of call out I'll make to this, if you're a larger organization that maybe has like enrollment staff, an enrollment team, you're going to see this number actually be a little lower and your phone call is going to be much higher because you are staffing people to kind of go generate demand, follow up with demand, take phone calls that lower market segment operators just don't have the staff to do. So I think this especially scales depending on your size. If you're a smaller operator with fewer resources, like you absolutely have to be doing everything you can to self-schedule. Larger operators with a ton of resources, they can spend time making phone calls, right? And that's the difference we see. But we know self-tours are going up. We're seeing a little bit of a growth in this other pie. So we might have to start showing more kind of sources here, more inquiry types, excuse me, going forward. Live chat's a really big one. Chat is a popular method. We're seeing more customers integrate data into our system. That's a huge piece of that increase from 8 to 11 is just integrating data through chat. Be very curious to see how that data converts. Are those high quality leads or low quality leads? My guess would be they're sometimes maybe a little lower quality, but that's a guess. We shouldn't guess. We should get the data on it and make an objective decision there. If you're looking at the middle chart here, this bar chart, and you're kind of saying, well, why are you showing me different numbers? What do these mean? All right, we're saying how many leads have just come in through these channels, then what channels actually register the most. This is the same thing we showed last year. Walk in, yeah, if you're going to walk into a center, like your intent is pretty high. We are a technology platform. We believe in digital touch points. I will always still advocate that local branding, local presence, walk-ins. These are hugely, hugely important pieces of your business, and they're actually incredibly high quality leads. I think self-tour is interesting too. A few years ago, there was this narrative that, hey, if folks are going to self-tour, they're not going to be that serious. I'm not going to get a chance to have that phone call and tell them how incredible our center is, and I'm going to lose that first hook. Your first hook is really digital now. Families are going to learn so much about your center before they talk to anyone. Again, I have a 4-month-old daughter myself now, and as we explore care options, like I promise you, I'm going to be in an AI tool in Google in tons of in ratings and reviews. I'm going to know everything about every center in my area before I make the first phone call. So I think it's important to not be, again, afraid of not having that first phone call. You should be very concerned about your branding presence, your digital presence, your emails and text messages that go out, because that's how families are actually learning about you first, right? That's their first touch. So that's kind of an interesting category to see increase a little bit. So if we take a step down, it's like, cool, we can see the channels leads are coming from. What about the sources? This gets pretty hard for us to aggregate. So, our customers so badly want us to get these benchmark data points, and we want you to. And we're going to keep doing this analysis, and we're going to keep finding ways to get you more data to see what's happening in the industry. We love doing it. It is admittedly hard at times, right? Sources are something where we probably have hundreds of different sources being used across our broader ecosystem. But we have ways to kind of similar to kind of aggregate those and provide some trends, right? So the most leads that are registering are coming in through paid channels, right? Again, we're not looking at kind of the number of leads. We're looking at the registration rate. We're looking at the registration rate. So paid channels, are effective. That's I think maybe not a huge surprise. Referrals are effective. Actually kind of surprised that number is not even much higher. Maybe there are reasons why folks get on wait lists or they can't actually end up enrolling. Local, as we talked about, is very effective, very effective. Like I think absolutely, especially we talk about opening up a new center. And again, this is so much more, y'all have so much more experience in this than we do on the technology side, but local presence is massive, massive. And that is a big difference maker. Direct traffic tends to maybe not convert as well. It's just kind of a bucket for us of saying, hey, they're just kind of on the website, or they come in through the website, or we maybe don't have a great way to attribute it to a paid channel. We're kind of throwing a little shade on Facebook. It's a very easy source for us to track. I think all of our customers, I know, I shouldn't make a generalization like that. Vast majority of our customers are getting leads from Facebook. It is a very good lead generating source, not so much a great registration source. We've kind of taken a huge bucket of other social media and actually is outperforming. Now, here's the challenge. Before you say, hey, I'm shutting off Facebook and I'm going to go nuts on, Instagram and Pinterest. Um, you have to measure this against how many leads you're getting. Facebook might be 5%, but if it's 30 times the leads that Instagram is generating, okay, well, you still have to weigh that, right? You still have to weigh that. This isn't telling you how many leads you're getting. It's just telling you how well do these channels register. So we're going to try to make some big kind of statements here for you to digest and think about. You need to go back still and look at your own data to make informed decisions here. But it's interesting. I think this is really interesting. Local, super powerful. Paid advertisements work. They work, but they're expensive, right? Social is tough. Social is very tough. I think you should definitely kind of monitor your channels there and make sure it is worth it if you're spending a lot there. What about communication types? We always get asked about this. What's happening in the landscape? Should we be texting? Should we be emailing? Should we be calling? What is working? What is working really, really well? It's a combination. I think it always is a combination. So we took our data set and said, what if we look at every single family that registered in 2025 in our system, all of them, and we start to track, okay, what's a really aggressive customer look like? What's a passive customer look like? What's kind of a middle of the road customer look like? And then what about the highest converters? So you can see really aggressive, right? Maybe 9 text messages, 22 emails. That's a lot, right? Most aggressive somewhere, depending on kind of what your mix is going to be 24 plus touches. That's pretty heavy, right? We could probably say, hey, that's maybe a little heavy. I might be a little intimidated as a family if I'm getting hit up 24 times throughout my process. On the passive side, 4 is pretty low. That's not enough information. That's not enough information for me, right? So I think, these are examples of what you might see at the upper or lower end. And then your median actually tends to be where we see our best converters, right? It doesn't mean more is better. This is a very interesting area where more is not better, right? It tends to be in the middle of the road. I think where you're maybe seeing the highest converters versus the median is text messaging, right? Median's about 3, highest converters is up to 5. So this is a data point we're gonna, I think, continue to see grow. We have probably doubled or tripled the amount of text messages our system is sending out year over year. It's just more popular. I know, like, unfortunately, like my phone is useless because I get so much spam, I just don't pick it up. Text messages concern me at times too, but at least I'll always read them, right? So I would make sure you do have a texting strategy. We showed this data last year. We actually said it was about a 2-to-1 email to text. That seems to be shifting a little closer to 3-to-2 now, right? So, I think you want a good mix. Emails are very, very good to deliver still. I don't think any of our users are going to kind of stop doing that, but 8 emails, 5 texts, that seems to be a pretty healthy way. Go look at families you're winning, that you're signing up, that you're getting on wait lists, that you're registering, and take a look. How many texts are you sending them? How many emails? And you can, start to understand what a healthy pipeline looks there. I was excited to pull this data again, and I'm going to be excited to pull it again next year. And I talked a lot about lost opportunities. I think this data is gold. Like I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to make sure your team is attributing and tagging lost opportunities because it just tells such an important story. Now, if we look at kind of this left side of the chart, a huge portion is just we kind of lost contact with them. That's fine. That is going to undeniably be true. Like that is the reason. I don't know. I don't know what the family did because we couldn't get in touch with them anymore. That'll always remain the biggest pie, but we want to really try to shrink that down as much as possible. You could almost say, hey, what if we just kind of deleted it from the chart and said, hey, let's just ignore these. We couldn't contact them. We kept them in for now, but let's start looking at the other end. And even though these are small percentages, right, we're talking tens of thousands of leads that make them up. So, I've kind of highlighted where you're seeing a relevant delta from last year. I'm not doing it on the lack of responsiveness because it's just not really helpful. They just didn't get back to us, right? We can't really tell a story from that. What we can start telling a story for is let's look at what's particularly up. Affordability, we're losing on. Staying at home, we're losing more on. Proximity, right? Hey, maybe it's just too far from them, not going to work, we're losing on. What are we maybe not losing as much on? Okay, variability in programs isn't as much of a concern. And no availability, right? 0% doesn't mean zero, right? It just means it's, less than a percentage. Again, we're talking tens of thousands of leads. So it's definitely not zero. I promise you, if you read that and you're like, how's that possible? But it's just definitely not as relevant as it was compared to last year. So for us, that kind of lines up with like, we are in a very competitive spot in early childhood education. Like to me, I'm looking at this data and I'm like, okay, competition is at its peak. That's because of at-home care. That's because maybe the families have one of the family members is staying at home and not working. That's because there's a lot of different competitive early childhood education options in my area. That's because of things like public pre-K. That's because of potentially loss of funding options. I mean, there's a lot, and you all know this because you deal with it every day. But this is why this data is so important. If affordability is skyrocketing in my lost opportunity reasons, we need to look at our tuition pricing, right? If stay at home is skyrocketing, our messaging and our branding needs to be so focused on why our center provides value, why early childhood education provides value, and what the risks are, maybe not flooding, but what the risks are of leaving your child at home and not going into care, right? So, like, you got to have this data, you got to know it, you got to look at the trend because if one of these starts really trending up, you want to tailor your strategy and your messaging around that. I think it's just so important for you to look at and understand. All right, finishing off, you've heard me talk a lot today. I appreciate that. Age groups are fascinating as well. And I want to keep doing more with this data. And I'll explain what we're looking at here because I think, it maybe doesn't tell the exact story you feel on the ground. But what we're kind of looking at is, okay, if we take our registered leads again, let's look at our bucket of registered families, not looking at waitlist, big asterisk. Let's look at our registered families. How many make up the age group and how many are converting? So infants are the most popular age group to reach out to centers using our platform, right? And that could be because you're also getting children that aren't yet born, right? It just happens to be the largest percentage of the pie. They actually convert the lowest percentage, though. A lot of outreach for it, less conversion. That's a hard age to capture and convert, right? And it kind of trends down from there. 5-year-olds, yeah, you're not really getting a lot of 5-year-olds to reach out because maybe they have a lot of other options, or maybe they're just at the center they're at, right? If I'm reaching out as an infant and I join your center and I love it and I stay there, I'm never going to reach out as a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old because I'm still with you. So this kind of makes sense, right? It kind of makes sense. But it's effectively telling us that, hey, you do see more younger children reach out, but of course, those are harder ones to convert. If older children are reaching out, they tend to be a little bit easier to convert. I don't know if there's kind of a huge takeaway here. I do think we all know this two-year-old, potentially 3-year-old segment is really concerning for us as an industry right now. Are we going to see fewer and fewer of those? Or this actually probably be, a question might come, hey, can you get me this on the retention side, Teddy? And I'm signing myself up for that a little bit. I hope we can, right? It might be more interesting to see where are we having the most trouble keeping these age groups. And I bet we would see some really interesting, maybe a little bit of a scary insight there in kind of the middle of the table. But we try to pull data on this, try to provide it directly helpful. Think it makes logical sense, but I don't know if there's any sort of incredible insight here, other than it is hard to win younger children, and you actually might just not have space for them because ratios are so challenging. Obviously, easier to win your older kids, but you just don't see as much of them. All right. That was a lot. I thank you all so much for sticking with me through that 50 minutes of digesting all of this data. I hope it's been helpful. If nothing else, it's got you to think about ways you can go pull your data on your organization, on your centers, and kind of benchmark. Again, number one, get the data. Number two, measure it against yourself from past periods. Number three, go start benchmarking it against maybe your peer group or your segment. Number four, go look at it against some of the largest operators in the U.S. and feel free to take that view. But you got to just establish your own data first, and go from there. And let us know what you liked to see. Let us know the data points we didn't show that you wish we had, where maybe you're flying blind, and we'll do our best to include it going forward.
Thank you so much, Teddy. We do have a few questions that we were waiting till the end. I know we actually went a little bit over today, so if you have a few minutes, we'll do like a rapid fire question if that sounds good.
Let's do it.
Right. So Nola had asked if waitlisted kids factor into the lost leads.
Yes, absolutely. So good questions on wait list. I should definitely make sure to kind of talk about that up top next time. They will factor in. If you put somebody on a wait list and they become a lost opportunity, we are going to consider that a lost opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you for confirming. All right, then we have quite a few specific questions. I'm not entirely sure if we will have an answer to this, but it could be some inspiration for a future session, but we'll make sure to address it. All right, someone had asked, what is the timeline we're seeing for East Coast centers to reach capacity? Again, very specific question. We're not going to have the answer to this right now, but
Yeah, yeah. We did a year ago produce data on enrollment and demand by state. And we ended up not including it because I didn't feel good enough about it to share with you all. It's fascinating to look at, and I love looking at it, but I didn't feel like we had enough data in enough states in enough cities to really drive a meaningful data point. So we actually kind of pulled back on it. So it's a great question, but yeah, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say I don't have an answer for you.
okay. We did get a question. You had touched on this slightly, Teddy, talking about retention as a future data point, but Daniela had asked if we have data on how many registered children centers are losing each quarter.
Yep. That is a really good question. We actually do have that data. I don't have it literally sitting on the top tip of my tongue right now. So we'll see if we're comfortable publishing that. I mentioned at the top, we like using registered because it's really easy to aggregate across all of our customers and the various ways they use the system. Enrolled gets a little trickier. And without going into excruciating detail, a lot of integrations handle movement of data, and sometimes we try to kind of stay away from that. But we should have actually pretty good data on, hey, this many registered and this actually how many fell out. So let me work on that. Let me work on that a little bit. No promises, but I think we might be able to aggregate that.
Okay, sweet. Well, we're keeping notes for next session, so maybe you'll see some updates. All right, and then another question, just when on the slide when we were talking about conversions based on your communication strategy, do we have a time frame for these touch points? Obviously, this is a large group of customers sending different messages. So I know we were able to calculate the amount of messages. And you did mention it was waitlist to registered status, but did we have like an average time frame for which those touch points were being sent, or is that not something that was recorded?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, that data is just showing how many communications are hitting them between the time they're a lead in your system and they waitlist or register. So it's telling us kind of the healthy blend of communication mix. I didn't say as well, I kind of touched on it. We didn't pull phone calls into that. Like there are definitely phone calls occurring in that 14, 15 touch point as well. So I just want to make that clear. Um, but your question is like, hey, is this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks? Different data point. Another one we can kind of look to add, and I've actually talked with a lot of customers about that too, conversion timing. Hey, what's the average time it takes to get somebody to registered? Again, that's where a lot of the questions came up today about the waitlisted status, and got to be a little careful with timing because if you really start to impact, does that center actually have capacity or not? But we might be able to produce that. We might be able to produce that and say, hey, on average, looking at the benchmark, these registrations tend to occur over, a 27-day period or something to give you just a little bit of a guideline. But don't have that one off the top of hand. We'll try to get it for next time.
Okay, thank you so much.